Thank you for having me here today. I see Beth right in the front row. Thanks for having me speak today. Yeah, that's me. Very old picture, but I'm happy to be here and talk here at CMX. It's actually my first time speaking on this stage. Today I want to talk about generative AI for community. I think there's so many things worth talking about and learning about. Today I'm only really going to cover how can community managers best leverage generative AI. I could probably talk for 4 hours about that, but I think it's good to start off with some basics that I'm not even sure everyone's caught up yet. So before we start, I'd love to know how many people in the room have even tried ChatGPT? Okay, good to see, good to see. How many of you use it maybe once a month? Okay, once a week? Okay, that actually surprised me. Every day. Okay, so I'm actually quite surprised. So maybe this might be easy for you guys, but definitely want to talk a lot about how GenAI has impacted my career, what I've learned in the process, and I think some takeaways for anyone, even for the daily active users of generative AI. So a little bit about my background. I've had an interesting tech startup career. To start my career, I worked at UiPath. At the time, no one had heard about it. It was in their Series C back in 2017, 2018. They're a robotic process automation company that just started expanding their product into AI at the time. And so I stayed there actually until IPO, which is when I won my award at CMX, which was when I first got involved in 2021. So to say 3 years later, being on the stage, a lot has happened since then, is to say the least. But it's really good to be back and to be back within the community. So after UiPath, I actually joined Copy.ai. So for anyone familiar with that company, it was one of the first companies that incorporated a GPT into their product. So Copy.ai actually used GPT-2. So if anyone is on the technical side, today GPT is at 4.5 turbo. GPT-5 coming out any day from now. So every year there's a new model that comes out. So they started with GPT-2. And so when I joined at that time, that was not just about community engagement, it was about customer engagement specifically. But one thing that I really got to work there was on trust and safety, working with OpenAI's safety team about the prompts, as well as learning about image generation. And at that time, image generation was very fuzzy, to say the least. There was nothing good coming out of any of those prompt generations. So after Copy, I decided to take a break. I founded my community consultancy, DQM Strategy, started working with a lot of consumer social, entertainment-based startups because at the time I was living in LA. But then I got recruited by DeepLearning.AI. So if any of you have heard of it, it is an education platform teaching courses about generative AI for developers far and wide, founded by Dr. Andrew Ng. So it's been a very fun experience to say the least. So I think I'm a little caught up or two on what's been going on. So to just catch everyone up, I thought this was a good definition of what generative AI actually means. I took this from NVIDIA's site. Generative AI enables users to quickly generate new content based on a variety of inputs. Inputs and outputs to these models can include text, images, sound, animation, 3D models, or other types of data. So for me, I'm only going to really focus on text and image today. I think that's the most relevant for community managers. But I think people should be aware that there's so many capabilities and a lot have not been explored yet. But really excited for the next few years to see what's to come next. Cool. So why is GenAI helpful for community managers? I watched the session earlier today with Derek talking about, how can we focus more on relationships and people? What would communities would have been like if we had these tools and didn't have to overwork ourselves or stretch ourselves thin? And a few of the points that I wanted to make was with generative AI, at least for me, I think the admin and content creation of being a community manager can be smoother, can be less time consuming. I am certainly not an engineer, so nothing today will involve coding. I think I could speak for a lot of people in this room. This is the upskilling part that I think is actually manageable, and I wouldn't be preaching these things if I didn't use them themselves. And lastly, chatbots will not replace CMs. I feel like that's been the discourse for a very long time, and I hope by the end of today you guys definitely are confident that will not happen. So cool, let's dive into it. So just as a focus for the next 4 use cases I'm going to focus on, I want to think about how can you expand your role as a community manager. I've been at companies where I had to create programs from scratch. I've had to scale. communities. Most recently at Deep Learning, I scaled the community from 220,000 users to 500,000 in just 6 months' time. But I was only able to do that because of all the tools that I've been able to use through either ChatGPT or other GenAI tools. So the first one is my favorite use case, and I don't think many people use it, is turning qualitative data into quantitative. The number one question community managers get from leadership is, how do you prove ROI? What are the metrics? What are the data? All those types of things. However, that's directly contrasting with what a community manager actually talks about. You know, when you think about how many user interviews you do, all the feedback surveys, what are the insights, you want to get sentiment analysis, you want to be able to summarize it. But at the time, deep learning scaled not just tens, but hundreds of thousands of users. And I was at a place where not only could I not even quantify how many responses we would get, like an open field text, I couldn't even summarize it. You know, it's like reading a book. Just my day-to-day job. And so I had to find a way to make this faster and easier for me. So the best way I could do that was to turn to ChatGPT or to Claude or Gemini or anything, but to synthesize user interviews, insights, and feedback. How was I able to prove some data points without having to lean on my coworkers? Because I'm not a data scientist. I'm not someone that's going to be like, hey, I know how to do all these formulas in Excel. I'll be the first to admit I'm not an expert. But tools like these were something that helped me be able to 10x my ability of being a community manager. So suggested prompt, I suggest all of you try and work with, is summarize these responses into the top 5 categories with percentages. So I'll show you a little demo in a second, but a fun fact, I've been able to get up to 500 responses, like, you know, from an Excel sheet into one prompt generation. So you're talking about 10 seconds of prompt generating, of summarizing 500 responses. So for this example, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with ChatGPT, what it looks like. I put generate a summary of the top 5 responses with percentages, right? What I did is I made a list, randomized, of 125 data points of fruit, and within 10 seconds, it was able to summarize it. Pineapple has 28%, blueberries, apple, orange, you get the idea, right? But if you think about what are the product feedback, how can you summarize and think about how can you say 25% of our users want to have this feature, 30% of our users want to have this, or have a sentiment analysis. Our users are extremely dissatisfied. 89% are really happy with the new release, right? All of this can be summarized just by submitting it into the text model. So this has been one of my favorite use cases, and has helped me put together presentations, be able to talk about the community more from a level of this is how I can divide it, instead of something that's just so vague as like just the conversations that I've had. The next use case I want to talk about is program structure, customization, and inspiration. This, I think, would be more helpful for some of the more junior community managers in the room, where once you get from a coordinator to a manager level, you have to start creating programs. And especially on the strategic level or leadership and community, you have to talk about how do you work with the top 10% or 5% of the community in different programs that you run. And then you're able to scale them. So for program structure, you're able to create, customize, and brainstorm the best programs that you need. You can also brainstorm names and titles and anything you may need, I think, for any program structure. So a suggested prompt that I would use is, create a one-pager of community guidelines about program details or restrictions, and see how can you customize this and make this best tailored towards your company. For all the strategic proposals that I've had to put together most recently, I generate the best outline, and I customize my personal experience for the go-to-market strategy. So let's go into it. So one thing I had to do at UiPath was I had to focus on a chapter program strategy. And I had to do it in Latin America, where I certainly don't speak Spanish, Portuguese, and the many languages there, and how to scale it within 6 months. At that time, that was the beginning of my career. Right now, I have a lot more experience, but this would have been really helpful for me at that time. So even with this very simple sentence, with very, little customization, I was able to generate, a pretty cohesive outline and structure to at least follow. So as you can see, it started off with defining objectives and goals, research, establish local partnerships, infrastructure, pilot chapters, training resources, marketing promotion, evaluation, improvement, and implementation, right? So this is all going to come out within 15 seconds of just that one sentence, right? I think another use case is a lot of people try and scrape programs from other existing companies. You no longer have to do that, and even if you want to, you can, still customize and still put it together maybe in a different way or combine some of these two techniques. But for me, this has been really helpful to just understand there's so many options available. There's so many programs you can create, and it doesn't have to just be yourself trying to create them. You can lean on this tool to create more, as well as, add or subtract whatever you like or dislike. Yeah. Oh, and so this is another use case. I create a one-pager of community guidelines for users that are not allowed to post any images in the community forum. I think this is like one of the most tedious parts of being a community manager. How can you create the right infrastructure, rules, guidelines, especially for platform management or for program management and behavior? And I didn't screenshot the whole thing, but you get the idea. It was very quickly able to come together with something professional, something quickly, and kind of keep you focusing on the other parts of your job that are really, really important. Cool. So I think this is the most common use case people would use, which is copy creation and editing. To me, this is my least favorite part about being a community manager. There's so many communications that just have to go in and out day to day. And instead of using the creativity for the people and the relationships that I want to talk to and create new programs, I have to focus my creativity on email campaigns or automated message copy on community platforms and all these types of, not so fun things, to say the least. So I would recommend, for copy creation, how can you think about short-term copy, long-form copy, for email campaigns, announcements, formal responses as well, and standard message copy across any community platform. So a suggested prompt would be create a 4 to 5 sentence email that announces whatever product it may be, or whatever announcement, and what makes it different. What are the features? So whatever's in the brackets, just replace it with whatever works best for you. For a fun fact, I also drop talking points as a list into ChatGPT, and I create a response email in seconds. This just kind of helps with the customization to make sure that it includes everything that you want to say and minimizes the editing efforts as well. For this, I put create a template for a 4-sentence email response to a rude community member who has violated community guidelines. I'm sure this has happened to many community managers in the room. Not exactly the funnest thing to draft together. I will definitely pass it on to my best friend, ChatGPT. So, pretty quickly you can see, I know it's a little small in here, but it says, I hope this message finds you well. I want to bring it to your attention, specific location, and you can just replace it. I think everyone can do Control C and V, right? So just have to replace whatever you don't need, and boom, you can get back to the rest of your day. Because if anything that I've understood over the years of moderation can escalate internally between, okay, who needs to see this, who needs to approve this, what do we need to say back, right? But at least this part can be minimized. And then this one, create a template for a 4-sentence email response. Sorry. Okay, there we go. Now this is my favorite use case, and the last use case I'll talk about today before any questions, and I left a lot of time for questions since I think there will be a lot. And to me, image generation, I think, is the most untapped into generative AI, at least at the moment. So for me, I've used it for generic or detailed images for different image placement, especially for content. It can go anywhere from event banners, blog headers, announcements, memes. Images are endless. They're always going to be necessary, especially with any digital product, digital content, and certainly with community management. So suggested prompt, this is a little bit more complicated because depending on, how complex you want your image, it really depends on the layering of how you put the prompt. If you just put like a horse is running through a field, maybe you'll get an average photo at best. But if you really want something to work really well, you need to have a prompt similar to create a ratio image. So ratio would be the sizing, whether that's like a square or rectangular landscape, with a character, whatever emotion they're feeling or expressing, clothing, what they look like. They're doing an action, right? You're setting up a scene and a stage, the body language, and whatever location, setting, and props associated you want with that. And so for that, you could have full color. Typically, people do black and white, but whatever image style and aesthetic you'd like as well. So you can make it cartoon style, you can make it hyper-realistic, impressionist, whatever floats your boat. So for this prompt, I put, create a square image of a female tech worker in casual clothes getting frustrated at her desk and laptop, pulling her hair out because of community management burnout, in a cozy, neutral, toned apartment with lots of houseplants, full color, cartoon style. So I don't know, does this look familiar to anyone? Anyone feel like that sometimes? So as you can see, it got everything together. I mean, I guess this was its interpretation of cartoon style. Neutral tone, she's pulling on her hair, she's frustrated. I guess there's no community implication, but the context is there. And you can edit this however you want, right? This can be a blog header, this can be, you can add text to it. It can even be an event banner, right? However you'd like to do it. You can even change the style. So I only changed one word from the original prompt. I said dystopic style. Then it starts to look like this. But as you can see, we're still in generative AI infancy. One thing I want to point out is even though I only changed one word, right? Clearly there was a style difference of the hair and what the woman looks like. Her hair's up, I guess, in a dystopic world. She faces right in the dystopic world. It's now messy, even though that's not my interpretation of dystopic. It's messy outside. It shouldn't be messy inside. But anyways, all to say, it's still in its infancy, right? This is me. I took these screenshots last week. This is what it's like today. Imagine what it's like a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now. I mean, I can tell you 3 years ago when I was working at Copy and working with image generation models, it definitely could not do this. It was just like a blurry version of whatever it was talking about. So all to say, image generation has so many capabilities. The last use case I want to show is this prompt, create a 9:16 ratio image. That is an ombre, dark purple to magenta. I didn't show the full thing, but as you can tell, the formatting is supposed to be an Instagram story. So this is where you can use different image formats without having to actually be a designer. And then you can edit the image from there, whether you send that to your graphic designer, but you're able to just mobilize better whatever type of content that you may need. Cool. So recommendations for starting for GenAI. Find a workflow that you can incorporate. There are thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of use cases I'm sure that any community manager can do, whether that's you actually focusing on your community or whether that's you focusing on the admin side or working with a team or trying to expand that, right? 2, decide the use case. If it should be text creation, image, data summarization, whatever that might be, you may want to separate that, whatever that looks like. Once you get there, you want to create an initial prompt and generate, right? So I gave some suggested prompts. I'm sure these slides will be available after. If not, you can reach out to me and I'm happy to send them. And just generate whatever that looks like, whatever tool you're using, and review the output. You may not be satisfied. I've been using these tools for quite a while, and obviously I'm showing you the best examples, but I think it'll take time to kind of, learn how to best utilize them, how to make sure the prompt actually communicates and creates what you're looking for. If you're not satisfied with the outputs, you want to continue editing the prompt, add more specificity, and tailor the output response. Of course, continue to generate until satisfied with the outputs, and then you're able to implement it wherever you need to put the content, wherever you need to share internally, all those types of things. So I would recommend this kind of starting flow for GenAI. And for this, I wanted to put up a couple more products. So having worked in deep learning specifically, we worked with every single generative AI developer tool. And so to me, it was very clear there's more than just ChatGPT out there. And so the other freer versions, I think, of what's available is Claude 3 by Anthropic, Gemini, which is available by Google. Meta is definitely on the more technical side, but they just released Llama 3 last week. Gemini was probably included if a lot of people use the Google Workspace, the team works it, then you definitely probably have access to Gemini or it's already paid for. Claude, I believe, is free up to a certain extent unless you want to upgrade. And then for any developers, they definitely know about Llama 3 because it's been the biggest deal, I think, in the past week. So I definitely recommend checking out other tools. ChatGPT is the most mainstream for now, but I wouldn't be surprised if some other tools surpass ChatGPT. So I would say don't get too attached to it just yet. Great. And so I think the last thing I wanted to talk about today are some community industry predictions for GenAI. Obviously, I focus more on the startup side and the GenAI side than community, even though I've been in community for quite a while. But just some of the things that I saw, especially working in a developer-heavy space, what I think could come next. The first one is, what's going to happen to developer relations? How is that going to expand, contract, move forward, all those things like that. I think developer relations, at least from what I've seen from all the early generative AI startups, is going to continue, but the technical level is going to increase and get even higher and more difficult to reach that level. And I also think that it'll be a little bit more tight-knit. I don't see anything changing in terms of the developer relations field, but there's a lot of new faces on the block, I think, from what developer relations meant in the past 5 to 10 years, and I think what will come in this new wave of talent and people able to operationalize these tools. Which leads to number 2, I do believe in a community manager job increase. I know it's a sensitive subject because there's so many layoffs that can happen, and how does generative AI impact community management? But with all the startups that I worked with, all of them are looking for a community manager, whether that's for developer tools, whether that's for customers, advocacy programs. I definitely think there will be a huge community manager job increase. And I think it'll be an exciting opportunity to kind of mesh and combine the two, whether that's using tools like this to improve being a community manager, and then also at the same time expanding why it's most important to have such great relationships with your customers, your community, and that product feedback loop will never cease to exist. The last prediction is community platforms integrating GenAI features. So a lot of the use cases I talked about today are things that I do off a platform, right? I create all this content, I put it, whether that's Google Docs for internal strategy meetings, I put this onto our platform for like a banner of a new web page, or I create content for the community platform for engagement, right? But none of that is integrated or native to any community platform yet. So what I'm excited to see is a lot of community platforms, I think, will be smart to integrate a lot of these features into their platforms to make it easier for community managers to use. I can see this happening. I hope it happens. And I think to some extent, there will be a lot of new features in the next 6 months to 2 years. I think that will really impact how you do your job as a community manager.